programming foundations for that. The kinds of code you would need right now to make that happen are just not practical. And so we're investing massively in building the programming language technologies around Verse and our proposed standards for future metaverse programming that we hope will solve those kinds of problems and make that kind of world possible.
So first of all, that's a super exciting future where it's not hundreds or thousands, it's millions of creators that can just create different small or big elements of a world as big as Earth. Just if you sort of close your eyes and imagine that world, that's really exciting. Where it's not a centralized company controlling the release of a particular island or so on. It's people constantly dynamically modifying all the islands of reality in this digital world. So if you could speak to some of the technology that can enable that. You mentioned the Verse programming language. First of all, also, how legit is it for you, CEO of Epic Games, to be a co-author? The programming language theorists are losing their minds. So co-author a paper that's describing some of the nuanced details of a programming language. So maybe you could speak to this programming language called Verse. It's a functional logic language. What is it? What are some cool features of Verse?
Verse is a programming language that we're building for large-scale simulation programming. It's designed to make it easy to write code that can scale up to not only you building a Fortnite island, but you building modules or components that can be used by millions of other programmers and code just in a huge environment. And also can scale up to a huge-scale simulation. Some games will be small. Battle Royale might find that 100 players is actually optimal. It might be the 1,000-player version of Battle Royale be worse, but I bet there are thousands, million, and tens of million player experiences that are even better than that that will yet to be discovered. And so,
tens of millions of players together.
Sure, we've had Fortnite events that have attracted 15 million concurrent users, but the fact that they're all divided up into servers with 100 players each for those events isn't really positive. It's just a limitation of the technology. Tracing that to Unreal Engine 1 and its single threading decisions. If we could build a concert where all the concert participants, potentially tens of millions of them, that participate together simultaneously and see that there's a massive crowd and they can all do interesting things and interact with each other, that would be way cooler.
I'm just loading it in. Just imagining together in one scene graph, 10 million people interacting. What a cool world that is.
Sure. Well, 10 million people. You have less than 10 million pixels on your screen. So as what's the sampling theorem say? It says that you don't need full overhead for every player. You need to render the players around you and some approximation of everything else.
Yeah, but there's also a networking component. You're speaking to the rendering, but oh boy.
There's a lot of work to add, but this is what we do for a living. We solve hard problems.
I understand.
Because if they're easy, then other people could have solved them already.
That's really cool. Just sort of the possibility, the vision of that is really cool. Even 100,000 people or 10,000 together. There's a reason in the physical world when you go to a concert and you have all those people around you, that energy, or you go to a football game, that energy is unlike anything else. And if you can bring that energy to the digital world, that's amazing. But anyway, so what, on the technology side, bringing that to life, on the programming language side, can you continue as I really interrupt you, talking about Verse?
Verse is a functional logic language because we think that's the way to make the most simple and powerful language simultaneously. Back in the 1970s, the programming language designer who built Pascal, one of the early programming languages, Python's first, or Verse, American by stated this principle that programming language should achieve a high degree of power, not by having a lot of features, but by having a small number of features that work together and can be composed together arbitrarily. So that you have to learn a relatively small set of things, then the real knowledge comes when you learn ways to combine them into bigger and bigger programs. And so there's all history with programming languages, but in the 1950s, the first programming language designers got together the first standardized language called Algol. And then there's this meeting in 1950 where you really know that where all the major foundations of modern programming languages were Python, the C family of languages there, and we're very much living in the world so defined by them. And thankfully they got a whole lot of things right. Define how functions should work, how variables should work, how variables should work, and thank God they got a few things wrong. And Verse is trying to fix those, and that's the functional logic part. The interesting thing about functional logic language is that in multiple language, an expression produces a value. In functional logic language, an expression can produce 0, 1, or multiple values. If it produces 0 values, we might say it fails. If it produces 1 value, we say it succeeds. If it produces multiple values, it's kind of providing a set of values to iterate. And so there are a bunch of features in today's programming languages that are just defined in an ad hoc way without really thinking through it. 0, 1, or many values way. That's the problem that functional logic language address. The most basic example is the if statement in programming language. If some condition holds, then do this if, modify to do that. And in the language today, some variables of expressions produce Boolean values, variables are true or false. The expressions evaluate Booleans, and so you can express a condition with one of these features together, but you've lost any computation done using a Boolean expression. So in the functional logic language, your condition wouldn't do that. It would either succeed or produce the value, or it would fail. If it succeeds, it goes to the then branch. Your operation succeeded, now your operation is running just one dash code, and if your expression fails, then you go to the else branch. But the exciting thing about that is your expression that succeeds or fails can produce values and find variables that are then accessed by then. So you can write a conditional where you can only get the inside of the condition on the then if a bunch of variables have successfully been bound to variables. So let's use test this condition hold and then use the results of the test. That gives you a much higher level of reliability. And in a for loop, in traditional language, it's just a bunch of inherited code woven together to produce a bunch of values differently. It's rather awkward to do complicated things in for loops, and so you often end up with these ever more complicated constructs to work around that, iterators and other things. The idea of functional logic languages is your for loop can just produce multiple values. And if it produces 0 values, you have to iterate 0 iterations. If it produces a bunch of values, you have to do all those iterations. Rather than having much nested, you can write arbitrary things that look like SQL queries in a condition or in a for loop that find a bunch of variables, do a bunch of tests, produce a series of results in some order that you're iterating over, and then handle all of those results. So you kind of gain the power of SQL queries, large complex queries of data structures in a language that is much simpler in which your code is just performing simple iterative operations. This kind of gives you the best of databases and of regular programming in a much more uniform way. And the power of this is now users can write functions that not only produce a value, you can write functions that might fail. And so you can write a function that answers the question. The answer can be either yes and my value is this, or no. And you can combine these together into arbitrary queries. I feel like the funny thing is that this is not how C++ works. And so when we have Epic programmers moving over from C++ and writing their Verse code, I write C++ code in Verse file, and it actually ends up being convoluted code that's worse than good C++ or good Verse. If after a few months they get to speed and they're writing really awesome code, it's higher and more complex than before. And with users who've never programmed before, but are learning programming for the first time in the context of Fortnite, it's really fascinating. You see these users are learning this kind of, it becomes their intuition. They just assume programming works. They're writing way more advanced in this and for loops and conditions than we're often writing internally because it's more concepts.
Yeah, you said a lot of really interesting stuff. First of all, it's very interesting that there's a lot of people learning programming for the first time with Verse, which is a very different way to look at programming. And in some deep sense, as you're saying, a very intuitive way to look at programming. But there's a lot of properties about this being a logical way. One of which, we did maybe speak also about confluence, but also correctness. So being able to prove the correctness of code is basically easier to run bugs. Can you speak to that, the importance of that when you're building the metaverse?
Yeah, right. So the challenge of the metaverse is, first of all, it is based on code that's evolving over time, written by many authors. You like to see every second a new module updating something, and you expect in this live, ever-running simulation that now for everything to upgrade live in place. And so one critical component of that is the ability to release an update to something you've already published and be sure that it's backwards compatible with the one that you've already released. And that's essentially a type checking problem, checking that your new interface is backwards compatible with the old. And that comes down to the type systems language. There's been a lot of very interesting research on type systems over the years. Most of which hasn't ever made it into the C++ programming language, unfortunately. You see several branches of that whole field. One of the really interesting things that Java and C# did in the early days when they were abandoned and longer updates is finding a very rigorous set of rules where if you publish a module with one set of types today, then what changes can you make to that module for your future updates so it don't break backwards compatible? And that's a problem for type checking. Like say you have a function that promises to return some integer. Well, in the future you could say that returns some natural number. Every natural number is an integer. So that's backwards compatible change. You can't say it returns a rational number. Some rational numbers are not integers. So the system properly rejects that kind of change. But the much more interesting thing about type checking was the realization it was actually made in the 1930s. If you design a programming language type system in a very particular way, then it becomes not only useful for expressing types of variables. The traditional thing every type system does is say like variable x is of type integer. But if you design a type system in a certain way, then your type can express theorems, like mathematical theorems. The Pythagorean theorem is a cool one. One theorem you might set in a program is like a theorem that this function takes an array of integers and returns an array of the same integers, but the result is sorted. If you express that as a theorem and you follow this system of type theory, then you can actually require that anybody who writes that sorting function to prove that it has actually sorted its result. And so you have types or theorems, and values constructed a certain way to be proofs of those theorems. And nowadays in mathematical literature, you see more and more theorems are being proven mechanically. Mathematicians are proving theorems in a way that is verified by computer to be a correct proof. In the old days of math, people would write down, if you look at all of Euclid's theorems, it's just writing an ancient Greek to say accepts the proof to convince the reader that the thing is true. Starting in the 1930s, mathematicians moved towards rigorous formal proofs in which there's a series of tests that can be mechanically verified for proving things. And when mathematicians say they've done a computer proof of a theorem, what they really mean is they've written a program in a proof language, like Lean is a theorem prover, CLQ is a theorem prover, and there are several others. It means they've written a mechanical proof in that language that the computer is checked so that it's impossible to lie. If you say that you've proven a thing and the computer verifies it, then it's definitely true. This is a feature of mathematical proof languages. It's also a way that an idea that's taken its way into programming languages gradually over time. And writing conversions can be the first mainstream programming language that fully adopts that approach and that technique. And not only adopts it, but adopts it in a way that's really user-friendly, so you don't have to do that. And the idea of this is that you want gradually more information to be incorporated into the types of variables. The property you want of a programming language is if either accepts your program and doesn't beep and tell you there's an error, then your program should work. Now, there are all kinds of ways humans can make mistakes there, so that we'll never achieve that ideal. We can get closer and closer to it by having more and more language features that enable the compiler to catch more human coding errors and tell the user what went wrong. And that becomes extremely important in the metaverse. The cost of fixing a bug that made it through the runtime and is in user's hands. The cost of fixing a bug in a shipping program is hundreds of times higher than fixing a bug that you've just observed as you're running your code yourself. When it's running on your computer, you just fix a line of code and your bug fixes. When you have to fix a bug, you have to release a patch, you have to release patch notes, you have to test the patch, you have to check for all the other bugs that land in it, and everything becomes vastly more expensive. So the real aim of the first program approach is to catch all these errors in compile time and make the metaverse a very different place.
Do you see a world where, like, at the compile time, you prove the program is correct and successful correctly?
Proving things becomes notorially harder as they get larger, right? So the really important thing about this whole field is that you should be able to adopt these capabilities gradually and apply it where you really need it. Like if you're writing something like a cryptography algorithm, that's a good place to prove stuff. If you're writing a data decompressor that's going to be used by an entire ecosystem, like proving that doesn't overrun memory is actually really important. And a lot of the reasons security vulnerabilities happen today is because in a different language the compiler could have caught, was not caught, and cheap because it doesn't have this feature. So yeah, we shouldn't see this as scary. Everybody working in a type language like C or Java, proving theorems all the time. If you have a variable type integer and you assign some value to it, you're proving to the compiler that that value is an integer, because otherwise it would reject it. And so as we add more and more advanced proofs, and compositional properties falling out of our systems that they're easy to use and people prefer to use. If we might think in the future where we have AI helping us write certain kinds of code, the big problem with AI is you ask it to do something, ask you to write a fragment of code that does something. It might give you a perfectly valid fragment of code to compile, but it does the wrong thing. And if you have languages where you can say, write a function that supports this array and prove that it did that, you can actually write it, and if the compiler didn't beat what it could trust it was actually sorting the array, and otherwise you could go back to the AI and say, what did this work? But getting to the point where we know that our programs do what we say they're going to do, or think they're going to do, is a very important thing.
And by the way, you mentioned that you sent me a note about Curry-Howard correspondence, which I went down around. That's a whole fascinating field. We've chosen mathematical relationship to programs and proofs.
That's right. This is a result from the 1930s. It's one of the most important results of computer science. Almost nobody knows about. Yeah. But he did this rigorous breakdown of type systems and the 1930s formulation of programming and established that everything you can prove in mathematical logic you can prove within a type system if it has certain features. If you break down what is a proof, well, a proof that integers suggest is some integer. Like 5 is a proof of integer. So when you have something like bar x and you say x equals 5, well, proving 5 is 5 is 4. And that comes as second-hand nature. You can prove all advanced things. If you want to prove that a pair of things are true, so like theorem A is true and theorem B is true, then you need to provide fair values. One proves theorem A and one proves theorem B. That's the constructive law. There's a disjunctive law too. And then there's an implication law for proofs. And it turns out that that's really satisfied by functions. When you write a function in a programming language, you're saying, if you give me this thing, I will give you that thing. You're giving me a parameter of type something, and I'll give you a result of some other type. And if you write that by writing the function, you're proving that given one of these things, you can produce another thing, and that's a proof of an implication. With only like 7 laws, can construct all of mathematical logic in a type system. And one of the important things for programming languages hasn't been given enough attention. Some aspects of programming language are subjective. They're just machinations of the programming language designer. Guido van Rossum decided that Python should support indentation a certain way. And it's always dealing with things like human indentation and naming of things. There's always one subjective layer. But there are other parts of programming languages that are not subjective, which is fundamental. And when you look at type systems, there's a way to do type systems that gives you mathematical proofs. And every other way of type systems doesn't give you mathematical proofs. It just works. And should often be rejected. So I think one of the jobs of computing is to identify what have we actually done right in the past and what have we done wrong. For everything we've done wrong, actually going back and fixing it. Otherwise, you just keep accumulating so much stuff that systems our customers are sweating. And there have been massive announcements of horrible vulnerabilities in software and services in the past year. It turns out that they can take back how those surveillance systems for wiretaps. Like, huge problem there. But often when you break it down, it's probably because of some buffer overrun in some C program. These decisions about programming languages have long-term implications.
It's really fascinating that in building these systems that hundreds of millions of people use, you're really thinking about like how you actually build it from first principles. So I should mention that versus primary design goals, simple enough to learn as a first-time programmer, general enough for writing and coding data, productive enough for building, iterating, shipping project, setting statically verified to catch as many categories of runtime problems as possible. Compile time is what we're talking about. Performant for real-time open world multiplayer games. We didn't really quite talk about performance. Maybe I can ask you about that in a second. Complete so that every feature of the language supports open abstraction of that feature. Timeless width for the needs of today. And then there's some design goals we talk about that strongly typed. Multiplayer not use the best programming, object-oriented programming, and variant programming. So it's as deterministic as possible. If you run it over and over, it runs in the exact same way. Available expressions, as you talked about, super fascinating. There's some cool features in this. Speculative execution, concurrency. Maybe can you talk about concurrency? Like, what is it about Verse that allows for concurrency at a scale that you have?
This is the one biggest technical problem that we're working to solve in this generation, and that is taming concurrency so that any ordinary programmer can achieve it by just writing ordinary code. Programming on a single thread is hard enough, but it is completely predictable. If you have a language that's deterministic and you run the same code over and over, it's always going to do exactly the same thing, and there's no unpredictability about what might happen. Right? You're reading and writing variables in some order, and you're always going to see it behave the same. The problem is when you introduce multiple threads or multiple nodes in the data center all working together on a single problem, is that each one can read and write different pieces of data and change the state of the world as they go. And still, almost all concurrency in real-world programs today is achieved. Programmers are writing this code that might run in multiple threads very, very carefully, so that they are negotiating among each thread to get access to data in a way that's going to give them predictable results. It's incredibly hard. It's so hard to do. In 5 generations of Unreal Engine, every single generation decided we're not going to try to scale all our intake those multiple threads. And it's just much too likely to go wrong, not only for ourselves, but for every partner company who likes to use Unreal Engine and tries to use it. It's just a massive click. There's a variety of solutions to concurrency that are all rather suboptimal. One accepted solution was like, just don't try to solve this problem at all. Let's break our program down into microservices. And almost all online websites at massive scale, Amazons.com, work with hundreds of microservices where servers negotiate each other by sending messages to each other. Programmers writing this things very carefully, they eventually get to being able to take orders and not make a message online too lightly. This is totally not scalable to the metaverse where you have millions of programmers, or you're not going to be computer scientists, unless you're going to be hubs and enthusiasts and first-time programmers doing stuff for fun. That's never going to work for them because they'll never be able to envision all the different dependencies between different computations that run in parallel. But it turns out that there was some amazing foundational work done in the 1980s that was made very real by paper on Castle concurrency, composable memory transactions, and it described the system for transactional updates to programs. And the idea of a transaction is transaction is a block of code, a bunch of operations in memory. A read might write, might process an order, might accept an order and reject an order. It might transfer money between one bank account and another. It might make conditional decisions. Oh, you have to transfer $100 from your account to this guy's account. We're going to see if you have $100. If you don't, we're going to reject it. If you have $100, we're going to take $100 out of your account and add it to this other guy's account. Without transactions, that everybody's randomly adding and subtracting each other's bank balances, then you might have somebody read a bank balance, subtract 100 and write it out. But you might find something else. So you might get inconsistent bank balances arising if you don't have a way of ensuring that these all run in a specific order. So the idea of transactions is a way of dividing an entire program into updates, self-contained updates that do an arbitrary amount of computation, but must run in a single-threaded manner. And in the case of games, the gameplay has updates. When you're playing Fortnite, you see gameplay outputs. Every other player is gameplay outputs. Every enemy is in gameplay outputs. Every rocket, projectile, and fire, and thing you see moving around with the graph, not just a fixed static fire. It's a separate game object. And each of those objects is updated at a rate of 1 update per frame, at 50 frames per second. So then in the course of Fortnite Battle Royale gameplay, you have tens of thousands of object updates happening in every frame. A simulation with going players, you have a whole lot more than that.
So right now that's done single-threaded.
That's done single-threadedly in each game session. This is why Fortnite is 100 players limitation. If you absolutely maxed out a server, maybe today you could get up to 140 or something. But it's not going to thousands or millions or billions. And so what we need is a technique for magically, automatically scaling our code to that. And transactions are the idea. The idea is transaction is a granular code that runs its entirety. So the idea of this transactional memory concept is that we're going to have programmers write completely ordinary code, reads and writes variables in a completely ordinary way, and they're not going to have to worry about concurrency. And in the system, like today, a computer just runs your program. There's no amount of speculation going on at the programming level. The idea of transactions is we have a bunch of operations we need to know apply. We apply a large set of concurrently. Instead of each one reading and writing from global memory shared by all, in which case it might be reading and writing depending on each other for the same data. It might be doing contradictory things to it. We're going to track all of our writes locally. We're not going to write data change. We're not going to write changes out to global memory. We're going to keep track of it in a buffer just for that one transaction. So we're going to be, it's going to look at that code exactly as if it's running on the global system, that global game state. But it's going to be isolated to that one transaction. It's going to be set aside and buffered up for consideration later. It's going to run tens or hundreds or thousands of updates concurrently. We're going to see which ones have read-write concepts. Because if two transactions don't read and write any of the same data, then you could run them in either order or simultaneously and change the end result.
Yeah, the order doesn't matter. This is so fascinating. To imagine this kind of system, arbitrarily concurrent, running millions of updates in parallel with gameplay objects. That's the thing that enables the thing that we're talking about, just tens of millions of people together in one scene.
Yeah, exactly. And the key is that you're running these updates speculatively, and you're not committing your changes to memory until you're sure that they're free of time. You might update 10,000 objects. You might find 9,000 of them were conflict-free. So you apply those 9,000 objects updates to memory, and they could run in any order, and it wouldn't change the result. Now there's 1,000 objects left over. Now you have to run those again, try them maybe in a different way to get them to eventually commit to memory. And in the meantime, you just throw all their computations away and redo them later. And by doing this, like, we're moving this from being a programming problem for the programmer to deal with to being a language problem for us, language designers to deal with. And we're moving a vast amount of pain that would be imposed on a million people instead to a vast amount of pain imposed on 1 people that could actually make it work.
That's amazing. That's really incredible. So what's the native thing in Verse? And I guess what you're outlining is if, and hopefully it is successful, this will be a big part of Unreal Engine 6. So what's the timeline? Where do you stand today?
So there's a lot going on in parallel. The key thing with Verse is that we have been specifying what we think is the complete version of the language with all the features we want, whereas we've been shipping more modest versions of the language over time. We've released dozens of updates to it over the past year and a half. And the idea is that the shipping versions gain more and more features over time, but each maintaining that version compatibility, the old version, continuing to improve and approach the ultimate version as we go. And we've been doing this experiment entirely within the world of Unreal Editor for Fortnite for now. We want to test this and iterate for Fortnite creators in just the metaverse usage case before we make it available to all of our partners using Unreal Engine for all their projects. And I guess to iteratively improve it and build it out, because right now, UEFN has relatively few features to program. It needs a lot more, and everything we add makes the world a much better place for Fortnite creators. And we're adding major new APIs every few months throughout the course of this year. Whereas Unreal Engine licensees who are going standalone games already have access to full engine for C++. They have massive expectations on the API, and so we can't release this to them until we build up all the essential features they'll need for building their gameplay in the future. And so, we have these two different kinds of projects. There's Unreal Engine 5 for game developers, and there's Unreal Engine 5 targeting the Fortnite community. And there's different bits of development that are only in one area of it that aren't applied to both. Not all the Unreal Engine 5 features are actually available in Fortnite, because not only we haven't figured out, haven't gotten to the point where we can deploy them to all 7 platforms in a platform in a way. And so it's a place for all these different kinds of development together as Unreal 6. And it's a few years away, we don't have an exact time frame, but we'd be seeing preview versions of it perhaps 2 to 3 years from now, and we'll continue its progress towards it.
So that's really nice. So there's this ultimate version of the language you're constantly working on. And there's the shipped version of the language that's used by a large number of people, but still in the constrained environment of the Unreal Editor for Fortnite, so for the Fortnite game. And then there are the more general Unreal Editor, Unreal Engine for the lessons learned in Fortnite context to be integrated in the more general context of creating simulated worlds for all kinds of games, including Fortnite. It's a really nice setup because you're both testing ground of the language of Fortnite, and you're keeping an eye on what the ultimate thing will look like, also necessary to deliver all the features of the match. Brilliant.
Yeah, the aim for U6 is to bring the best of both worlds together. A much easier gameplay programming for the Fortnite community and for licensees, more scalability to large-scale simulations of all sorts, greater ease of use, meaning it will be easier to hire programmers who are familiar with the experience with the thing, but also ensure that every game developer has full deployment capabilities, so they can go to game once and then ship it anywhere. Like, often version of this enables game developer any sport, either simultaneously both ship it into Fortnite as Fortnite Island players can go into, bring their Fortnite items, cosmetics, and interoperate properly, or ship it as a standalone game. If they ship it as a standalone game, they shouldn't be missing out on the open economy either, because in this time frame, we'll have opened up Fortnite item economy to third-party developers all sorts. Hopefully there's a standard body, there might be multiple phases of it, so that if you choose to ship a standalone game, you can still choose to have Fortnite items work in your game, have your game items work in Fortnite, have your item economy integrated with the overall metaverse economy, and it's all the really core problems of the game industry that people have been documenting in the strategy.
Yeah, by the way, that's really helpful. It's a really great book that I recommend people check out the updated version. Let me just ask for, because again, there's a bunch of developers because I saw that a lot of solo developers out there, they're basically creating video games solo. I saw, highly recommend it. It's great. Choo Choo Charles. It's great. Gavin Eisenbeis, the guy, he solo created this game. That's, I think, quite popular. I believe he says he used visuals. He didn't even use visual scripting, he used blueprints. Yeah, to create it. Okay, so I mean, all that to say, you should go check it out. Support indie developers, support Gavin, support everybody like that. I think support the sake, there's so much genius and artistry out there that we want to support the crazy games. All that to say, what are the ways that Epic can support indie developers like that, people like Gavin, like give them superpowers to create games from which they can make, at the very least, enough money that they can keep doing their art?
Yeah, well, it's really about productivity, because to be successful with a game, you have to have a great game. If you're targeting if you're going a type of game nobody's ever built before, you might be able to go with smaller, simpler games than if you're competing in a massive genre that has huge expectations. So it's all about enabling ways to do that in a reasonable amount of time, they can spend and to be able to finish it and ship it successfully. The tools are a big part of that. I mean, tools be as productive as possible. There are a lot of other facets as well, like having a content marketplace is a big thing. Just off the shelf piles of content, some free, some paid, built by other creators, can enable a small indie team to build a big game, and just be able to focus on the unique content of the game, be able to write your gameplay, and lay out your environments the way they want, and not have to build every tree and rock. Because somebody's already built one, and there's probably perfectly suitable for your game. There'll be more and more. And there's also a lot of indie developers living as content creators, who releasing content to the marketplace, or the asset for, and earn the internet. But specialization is a really valuable thing. In the early days, pretty much one person would build one game. That's how a lot of games were built in the 1980s. Over time, you had a preparation where artists became specialized programmers, and then gameplay programmers and programmers down to technical artists, and dozens of different specialties in a better way. And the more we can modularize those bits of content, so you could get something off the shelf every time you build it, or have we can synthesize it for you, the more we can enable creators to create stuff faster.
So we should talk about the fact that things you can philosophically and spiritually battling monopolies in general. So one of which is the Apple marketplace that charges 30% for developers. Can you speak about this idea that you believe that Apple and other companies should not be charging that kind of revenue cut?
Sure, well, let's start from a pretty basic principle of computing. The first computer I owned was an Apple II+, designed by Steve Wozniak and marketed by Apple, and then an IBM PC. And in those days, anybody could write code. Your computer literally turned on with a program level problem. You had to actually do work. Do not write a program and then somebody else's program. That was incredibly empowering. Anybody could write a program, anybody could put it on floppy disks, anybody could share it with their friends. Anybody could make copies of it, put it in a store, they could sell it, they could build a business around it, and they were completely able to, without seeking any big tech corporations' permission, do whatever they want. Even from IBM. Remember, IBM was the dominant computer company on Earth at the time, big IBM PC platform. And yeah, so it's really been firmly implanted in my mind that this was magical and wonderful time, unmatched economic progress for technology in the entire world. And over time, the companies have realized that they could shut down and block software makers from releasing software on their own, and block software makers from doing business with customers directly. I've always viewed this practice as terribly abusive, because when you buy a computer or a phone, you spend good money on it. It's your money you spent on that phone, and now you own that phone. And there's absolutely no reason that Apple should block you from installing apps from other developers directly if you want, going to their website, or writing your own apps without their permission, and running them yourself without having to get a developer account, without having to go through their bureaucracy. And there's no reason any consumer who gets an app shouldn't be able to do business directly with the developer, the consumer. You already bought that phone. Well, why should Apple be adding a 30% junk fee to all commerce you do? Why do they selectively apply some things and not others? I've always viewed this as deeply abusive, and that it shuts down the competitive engine that once fueled the app and software. It's still a vibrant competitive engine on Windows and on the internet, but it's no longer with mobile apps because these stores have popped up. And they don't provide any useful value to the user. Yes, there are search functions behind software. There's no reason other companies couldn't build a better one. And I bet if you had Steam, or if you had Valve or Steam for iPhone, Steam for iPhone would be a much better app store than that app store. And lots of people would use it. And that Apple would be forced to build a better app store in competition, and that everybody would improve their products as a result. But Apple and Google shutting down the competitive engine that drives the software economy has massive implications for every company. And one of them is rethinking the nature of mobile apps to be really offensive to gamer sensibilities. If you go on console, best console games you see listed in the store on the storefronts, and best console games you see reviewed are awesome games. They really have a lot of games there. The ones that sell the best are really enormous values for the money, and they're proud of the amount of work. You don't see that on iPhone. The top apps on iPhone, the top games on iPhone at almost all times are these ridiculously greedy, high monetizing whale games, which are pervaded with pay-to-win and loot box practices. They have a sort of legalized form of gambling, and these games are not driven by fun. They're driven by manipulation of players to greedy ends. And it's very hard for the fun-based games to actually succeed. And the cost of operating these online games are enormously high. If you have a game that's based on fun, it's not loot box heavy. You have to pay 30% of the revenue to Apple in order to just get access to the platform. 30% is way more than the company making profit. So if our debt fees more than the profits from an national company, then they can only stay in business by raising prices. So these 30% fees are raising prices all digital. It's just inflationary force in the economy. That's just the first direct act. But then for each user, when a user searches for before Apple bought Fortnite on iOS, when a user searched for Fortnite, the first result was always some competing game. Like utterly anti-user. Like, you search for Steam for a game, and if a game's on Steam, it's the first result always, because Steam's not getting initiative advertising, Apple is. And they do that so they can make even more than 30%. So if you want to be the first search result for your game, you're probably paying more than 25%. If you want to reach users on social media, you're paying another 20%. So literally something like 70% of revenue for your game is just going into jump fees to acquire users in your game. The money left over is only enough to fund games with relatively decent graphics. Do not look at normal gamers like games. There's some exceptions to great games on iOS, and there's some games with good graphics, but the engine has been really corrupted in a way that competition would fix. You don't need lots of competing stores on iOS, and you have much more options. You have much better prices.
I have a quick chat with Matthew. He asked me to ask this question: why don't more companies come back openly and totally as Epic has? What makes you want exactly to use this? And I should say, I think everything you said, I agree with. What Apple is doing is just wrong. I think Apple, in many dimensions, is an incredible company. They have brought so much good to the world. In this regard, I just think it's straight up wrong what they're doing. They're not providing the value of 50%. And even if they were, the monopolization, centralized control without competition is wrong. Anyway, why are you fearless to fight Apple on this? And other companies don't seem to one step up.
All companies are terrified of Apple because Apple can destroy their business. Epic was in a unique position with Fortnite. First of all, having the biggest game in the world at the time started fight Apple. Second of all, having the majority of our users playing on PC and console meant that if they lost access to during a fight, we would still be able to survive. That set up a big part. Facebook, you can name top 10 mobile apps. None of them would be able to survive without Apple. Like literally, their business would be destroyed if Apple blocked access to them. And Apple is incredibly clear with developers that they're willing to deprive all users of access to any app if they get in a fight. And if you look at how they dealt with that, they were not just legally maneuvering with the intent of winning court case against us. They were also sending a message to all developers in the world: we will destroy your business, or we will try our best if you fight us. A very small number of local developers have been willing to speak up, and Apple has actually refrained from crushing their businesses when they weren't violating any Apple policies. And that took a bit of discipline, but I think also not a calculation by Apple that they couldn't survive being seen as the company killer. They criticized the whole company. But the other thing Apple has is they can well readily deploy against every developer soft power. When you take 30% and advertising is so expensive, soft power by Apple, like improving your updates faster, we're slowing down all your updates by a couple of weeks, and also have a dramatic effect on your ability to be successful. And Apple has a very long history of playing cat and mouse games with developers. It's like what the developer didn't Apple's grace to slow down the updates. So they've been slowing down updates for several major tech companies, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, without all going under the radar because everybody's afraid to challenge publicly. And so Apple's dealing with soft power can change company economics for the worse and not to deter almost any public. And Epic doesn't fight because I firmly believe that something like a metaverse will only erupt. Something like a billion-plus user, real-time 3D social ecosystem that grows to encompass potentially all the most major games by all major developers tied together into an open economy where they all participate as peers and they all compete to give users the best deals and they grow and do business with their customers directly. That thing can only exist if the Apple rule gatekeeping monopolies are lifted. And it's not just the 30% fees. The 30% fees are economically driven, but they have those other levels of control. Apple prevents all web browsers on iOS from implementing web standards better than Apple does. Apple has really limited stable storage capabilities and 3D graphics capabilities on iOS web apps. So APIs can access from web apps running within a web browser. And that's eventually cripple those apps to ensure they can't possibly compete with native apps. By depriving web apps of those features, they prevent web apps from being native apps. Well, Apple, if they treat the metaverse the way they treat the web, they'll say you can only use Apple's metaverse engine. Other engines disallowed. And then they can impose all their own limitations on the metaverse to force all downloads through Apple, or force it to be so uncompetitive and lousy that they can't compete. And they have this giant array of these anti-competitive techniques they use to disadvantage other Apple developers. Saying, oh, the Apple can build certain kinds of apps, or only Apple can innovate certain features. In Europe, where the DMA law requires Apple to allow competing stores, they say a store can only be a store. You can't build a store in Facebook. You can't build a social network into a store. A store must only be a store because a store that's more than a store might be able to compete with us more effectively. It's just a giant, to use the Soviet term, it's a defense and death strategy where they constructed a massive series of barriers. Each are fatal to any attempt to compete, so that even if one barrier is overcome, the others remain in place and shut down the whole scheme. And that's playing out in Europe, where Apple has enabled us to launch the Epic Game Store, but has made it so difficult and uncompetitive both for Epic and for clients who want to do business with it. Has no chance of success until the European Union starts to really enforce the DMA law and impose large and serious penalties on Apple against clients.
I think it should be said that nothing else is wrong what they're doing there, and I hope there's market pressure and government pressure for them to open up the platform. And I believe, as a person who loves Apple, I believe this is also good for Apple. There's the natural thing in companies to close, control, and crush competition. But like Apple is full of brilliant engineers. Open it up, win. Going to create the right kind of competitive incentive to make the Apple store better, to make it feel. Because they're great at creating great interfaces. The competition will sharpen. It's just going to make everything much better. So I do hope there's a lot of pressure. And I deeply appreciate that you're speaking out in this way, just putting that pressure and letting people know like it's okay to say that this is wrong.
Thanks. Yeah, competition makes everybody better. You have a monopoly that's forced to compete. Suddenly, monopoly products get much better. Offerings to consumers get much better. I see some areas where Apple could be the best. What they have is just really, really lousy. It's this old guard of leadership who is clinging to these old policies, bringing themselves into the enemy of every developer, every regulator. And I think it's often massively clear detriment, and I can't wait for a new generation to come in and paint the right path to the future. That was also partnered with Apple for more than a decade. And then the partnership, technology, we put together, we did amazing things together. Nothing more than to have that Apple bring back Steve Wozniak's original views. The Apple II is such an amazing, completely open platform. The manual to the Apple II included a list of all the source code to ROMs, so you can understand exactly what was happening there and learn how to include the hardware the entire computer, so you can learn how to make a peripheral and plug it in and open it. And that's the awesome. That company would be the best company. I think the current one is just on the wrong side of history and needs to change.
Well, I hope Epic and Apple find a path forward together and flourishing together, and Apple embraces competition better. One of the things I admire about this conversation is that you mentioned Steam a bunch, with kind words, supportive, and basically never mentioned Epic Games Store. I love that. So I really love that. It really embodies the fact that you want variety, you want freedom for people to choose the best thing, and in so doing create this large network of humans interacting freely with each other. Okay. That said, one of the competitive pressures that Apple created a few years ago was by launching Epic Games Store, and instead of Steam's 30% revenue, right, we went with 12% revenue, right, creating the competitive pressures and listen, this shouldn't be that high, and which I thought was amazing. Yeah, I think it's still now, preparing for this conversation, I looked on the internet, and there was a lot of criticism of EGS, Epic Games Store. First of all, I should say, the internet is full of drama and criticism. Like, there's just not enough celebrating of awesome shit. Like, if you look at the internet as a blog, one of your questions, celebrate awesome shit, and also, just like there's not enough celebration thing. The two directions of criticism is just straight up the launcher interface is clunky and not reliable. And then the second set of criticism is the exclusive contracts, which were made with some of the games that are on Epic Games Store. So first, huge props on the 12%. Maybe speak a vision of that. And second, can you comment on those things?
Sure, yeah. I think one of the reasons that people characterize the Epic Game Launcher as funky, because like, the Epic Game Launcher is funky. And we need to improve this. There's a lot of work going on there, and I wish we'd gotten better at addressing quality of life features and prioritizing above all the other features. Because Steam has 15 years of work, like we need the best programmers in the whole industry working on that. Much larger games, working on Steam, and a lot more time working on it. And so we've had to make a lot of prioritization to what we support the Epic Games Store. A lot of times we're supporting commercial features like merchandising, offering multiple versions of the game for sale, and offering upgrades from the regular different slot edition and other things. And other priorities have been quality of life and launcher load times and other things. And we've not put enough emphasis on quality of life features. We've recognized this very clearly multiple times. We've gone through multiple refactorings, but that's definitely been a disappointment to us and to a lot of users. And I think one thing we had to take us a while to realize is it's not uniform. Depending on your proximity to a CDN and the size of your game collection, it can be either awesome or really funky. And the users for whom it's really funky are the people. I think they're a large part of the complaints.
They're going to speak up. And I should also say that the Steam launcher for a long time, from my memory, but also looking online, was also very funky in the beginning.
Yeah, and one of the criticisms of Steam Store from the beginning was we don't have all the features. We don't want to have all the features of the game. Steam has forums to the game. Because we don't want to create forums, and our partners, when we talk to them, generally didn't want to create Epic Games Store forums for the game, because there's already channels they prefer games on social media and a number of platforms, Reddit, and there's also places for gamers to discuss the game, and they prefer to discuss it to be there. So it's very much not our goal to mimic everything Steam. We do want to have all the convenient features that makes it easy and fun to use in Steam. So there's a long journey ahead. We continue to reinvest in, and we're working to go to multi-billion-dollar business there and succeed. Already the Epic Games Store supports an immense amount of Epic Games Converse and Fortnite on PC, now on Android and iOS and European Union too. It's a forever facet of the industry, and we never losing heart. And we think at some point, I really feel that the benefits of the Epic Games approach are going to outweigh the benefits of the Steam approach, especially as gaming becomes multi-platform. One of the things that really sucks for all gamers is that you have a lot of friends in the real world. Everyone has different platforms. Your Steam friends aren't connected to your Xbox friends, and you're not connected to your PlayStation friends and Nintendo friends, and so you're very much following up PC gaming into a hard to work with PC gaming and making all the other aspects of it. A lot of games are not working with it. It's a mess in itself. And now your Steam name is not your Discord name, that's not your PlayStation name, and now you have 50 point game and they have 4 different identities, and that sucks. Our aim for that is to, with Epic Online Services and the social systems we built for Fortnite, opens up to all developers to have cross-platform social features be super easy and free for all. It's not something where you're trying to get people or lock people into. It's just a way that we're making social gaming easier for everybody. As more and more games of the Fortnite approach being multi-platform, especially multiplayer games, that is a very cool phenomenon in the industry. It's the thing that's upending some games and causing growth in other games. It is the number one trend pervading the world of games today. And it says that, your game is automatically more valuable the more percentage of users, real-world friends that you connect with. Your game vastly benefits by connecting all the players together and not segregating off into different online platform populations and so on. So I think the future trend is in that direction. I wish Valve would open up Steam work on all that stuff. They could have easily done it. We did it. But they seem to be using it as a lever to keep people locked into Steam PC Game Store. And that's going to be a long-running battle because there's always a very tough game like they create an entire subreddit dedicated to criticizing Epic in their store. And they create basically harassment campaigns that developers use Epic Online Services. Developers do connect players across platforms, have friends across platforms, voices across platforms. But suddenly that's trying to be turned into a negative.
It's clear that Epic wants developers to win, wants gamers to win, and wants Steam to do awesome also. And in the competition between Steam and Epic Games to win, create awesome stuff together. It's obvious to me if you don't read the stuff online, but online it's like there is this just negativity. I don't think it's constructive in general. I should give a big sort of positive thank you and props for the push to multi-platform. And it was always there. Fortnite, perhaps before, the pressure that Epic created on breaking the barriers to Xbox, PlayStation, PC, and being multi-platform. Like I got a chance to play Fortnite a little bit with you, and all the people in the group, by the way, awesome interface, audio chat, really fun. But you can see like a couple PC folks, PlayStation folks, Xbox folks, all together. You can't really tell what they're using except for a little icon. And it's nice. It's like all those barriers that we've created with these platforms are gone. And you creating the pressure with the game store and just everything you're doing with this Fortnite platform. It's really nice. There's no reason to create this up. Because ultimately you should put the game first and let everybody interact with actual real life friends and make new friends across the entire network of humans. So anyway, thank you for that. Thank you for creating that pressure.
Thanks. Yeah, that was an interesting time. Sony had a long-running policy preventing cross-platform play, and we had a long series of conversations which got pretty harsh towards the end. But Sony ultimately came around, and they opened up PlayStation, and through a series of private conversations, they did work. Not only that, our partnership with Sony agreed to that argument back in 2018, and we got to those things on several more things. Sony, brand ideas like some God of War and games coming in Fortnite, and all kinds of crossovers, massive Unreal Engine adoption, and Sony games, really gets Sony pictures, really partnerships with Sony music. It's been an absolutely wonderful relationship, I think. It stands as an awesome example of a company that, because of historic reasons, got stuck with the policy that no longer made sense for the future, and following a serious discussion with a close partner, righted it and did an awesome thing, and now Sony's better off, and Epic's better off, and all game developers are better off, and the whole console industry, I think it's a lot stronger now than it would have been if, these silos had continued playing out, and despite the potential concern that, maybe blocking platform play with Xbox gave Sony advantage, Sony's actually grown in market share relative to Xbox since that time, and so you can't say anything with goodness came of that at the time. I think a better version of that would have received email I sent to senior Apple management and been like, there's an issue here, we should have a discussion, we should reconsider this, we should listen. And they didn't. And that's why we're in the midst of a 5-year battle with Apple, and hopefully it's still the early days of the game partnership with Sony.
Come on, Apple, we love you, Apple, do a little bit better. The second line of criticism that I mentioned, the exclusive contracts with some of the games. Can you just speak to that? Because in so much of the journey of Epic, you've been sort of against exclusivity.
But let's back up and talk about the principles at work here. Apple forcing other companies to use their payment service is a coercive decision by Apple. But if Apple convince other developers to use their payment service by offering benefits or a better deal, or funding, or any other positive incentive, then that would be perfectly fine. One is preventing competition, and the other is actual competition. Epic has never forced any developer into any sort of exclusivity agreement. Rather, they've offered developers payment or incentive to market any number of things valued to them in exchange for coming first or exclusive. And it's their game, so it's entirely rightfully up to them to decide how to distribute it, to make decisions about their business. It's their game. If they want to distribute it through Steam, they can. If they want to distribute it through Epic exclusively, they can. If they want to distribute it through both, then they can do that as well. And if we pay them money for other things of value in exchange for them coming exclusively to Epic, I think that's their right. And this is an example of Epic, an underdog with a tiny fraction of Steam's market share, working to proactively compete with Steam by offering a better supply of games. And some consumers who prefer Steam might prefer that the game be on Steam, but the developer in each case has decided that they believe they would benefit more by doing this exclusive deal in exchange for benefits than by being on Steam. And one of the key exhibits in the Epic Google trial was this opening exhibit, which was trying to point out to the jury in the trial the benefits of exclusive. Imagine it is more optional. the store has a big sign outside that we're in the store. You get everything the other store has, and it's at the same price. Are you going to go to the new store? No. Nobody's going to switch from Steam. If Steam has all the same games as the competing store, and everything price is just the same. And so we looked at initially two ways of competing with Steam. We wanted to sell games at a better price than Steam. By agreeing on the amount of money we pay game developer, where the game's going to sell for $50 and take 12%, we'd actually lower the price and potentially lose the money to offer a better deal. Well, we tried to pursue this, but very quickly every developer told us that they wouldn't agree to better pricing because if they did, then Steam would stop giving them marketing features and benefits, and the console makers and all relationships would be harmed. So there's an undercurrent of powerful platforms and ecosystems encouraging developers to price. Not being able to compete on price, we decided to compete on supply, doing exclusive deals, and we tried a lot of them, paid developers lots and lots of money. I think we distributed over $1 billion in net expenditures to developers beyond the revenue we actually made from games in order to get a whole lot of exclusive games. Some were successful, some weren't. Borderlands did awesomely on the Epic Game Store, and we gave ourselves that it did just as well through Epic as it would on Steam because players want Borderlands, want Borderlands. There's a lot of other games, and smaller games especially, they didn't have a dedicated audience that was absolutely going to play the game. Typically benefited from exposure on Steam, they're reaching an audience that wouldn't reach them organically. So some of them, in the end, they concluded that they did work finding on the Epic Game Store exclusively in terms of reaching fewer customers. And so we did limited time exclusives when they ran out. We put their games on Steam, and lots of data was gathered to understand what worked. And so this worked well for some games, didn't work for other games, but companies seeking to compete, especially underdogs seeking to compete, have to offer some unique value, have to offer something that's not available for their competitors. And I get that Steam users just prefer using Steam buying games and Steam want to have your library and they want to play. You're never going to compete for better deals if you don't support the mechanisms that allow competitors to come out. I think if Valve were forced through Epic Game Store's success to compete with Epic Game Store, developers would be getting a better deal. Consumers would be getting a better deal, and these 30% fees would be written down quite a lot towards the actual costs that are provided for stores.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. I've gotten a lot of Spotify tried to do this with podcasts. Enter as the underdog in this space and try to attract the games to deal with Joe Rogan, where the podcast will only be published on Spotify. Long term, what I would love to see for EGS for the Game Store is to not do any exclusive. Similar to what Spotify's doing now, doing Joe Rogan, Atlanta, whatever, and instead compete on the space of this, the non-clunkiness of the interface. Because the foundation of what the Game Store represents with 12% is just philosophically. You're also competing on the sort of spiritual realm of like what it stands for ethically. That's also a really powerful way to win. So now that there's enough number of people using Epic Game Store, like to drift away, to move away from that exclusivity, it's understandable they need the competition for the underdog to enter the scene, but it goes against the sort of the freedom, the free spirit choice that I think you represent a lot of the decisions you've made, just making games on this platform, and just giving freedom to the developers, giving freedom to the gamers to choose. In that way, I think exclusivity immediately goes against that.
Well, here's the conundrum. The exercise is talked about by all the competing stores has made it impractical for almost any developer to offer a better price for the Epic Game Store. You can imagine that if the effect of Epic only sharing 12% of developers was that games would cost 18% less than the game. Sorry, 18% less than the Epic Game Store. That would actually start to reduce the games. Definitely, people are coming here for better deals. But if that seems dealing with developers net phone costs and so on, when they propose to do that, prevent developers from passing on savings to consumers, then what's the mechanism that drives users away from the incumbent store to the store that offers a better deal? It basically makes the developers are fearful of competing on price through stores. It can possibly be done to get a dominant store with something like 90% of revenue share from multi-publisher stores in line so that a much smaller store. I think some answers required there. Better UI is great, like Steam is super polished, Epic Game Store and time will hopefully be as polished. How does that overcome after your entire library for the past 15 years is there? Developers are afraid to exercise their own economic, and developers are selling Epic 18% more revenue. So I think there's a real power to it's very hard to overcome through just being there and being as good.
Ultimately, where I hope it converges to is less exclusivity, and where the competition can be the kind I love the most, which is on the UI, on the experience, and then on the Steam side, on the 12%, they can go from 30% and start to support the developer by lowering it 30% closer to 12%. Anyway, I'm a big supporter, and I don't like the criticism of Epic Game Store, but I also have to say that I don't love that exclusivity, but I understand the reality of the world. You have to have some mechanism to get people to switch, or not to switch, but to at least get some of their games, to try out the experience, to allocate some of their library to the underdog. Totally understand. And hope the UI keeps improving.
Thanks. One more bit on that exclusivity point is that when we told Google that we were going to launch Fortnite outside Google Play and done competition with them, they viewed exclusivity as such a powerful competitive force. They went around to the top 30 publishers and paid out hundreds of millions of dollars to them in order to agree not to do exclusivity with competitors. And that was called Project HUD. HUG, Hold Developers Close. And that was one of the major pieces of evidence on which the jury found your practice to be illegal and competitive. One more on that, and you can always thought people would spend or save more costs because they have more features than it. We have data on that. It's very detailed. The all-in cost of operating the Google Play Store, stocking it, maintaining it, the software, the entire system, is around 6% of revenue. So, in a competitive market where a company whose cost is 6%, you would charge 30%. But absolutely not. And Apple's costs are similar. Apple runs an even more efficient lean operation, and Google's their costs are also in the range of 6% all in. You mark it up from 60% to 30%. Like, only a monopoly can do that. Yeah. Look at competitive business. The margin of percentage, the numbers there are strikingly supportive of just outright anti-competitive market distortions.
Okay, leading to the future. So we said it to me a bunch of times about indie developers. So do work all the way to do these big gaming companies. Do they have a future? What's their role? How do you see like in the next 5, 10, 20 years the evolution of these big companies and indie developers?
Yeah, there's one constant in gaming that manages to lose sight of all the time. That's fine. And that's fun. You play games for fun. Our whole job is to deliver fun. And there's a lot of games that failed recently. They didn't deliver fun, or they didn't deliver fun in a manner that was near the head of the other sources of fun that doesn't people's lives. And so, at a basic level, we don't need a terribly complicated theory to explain a lot of the melees in the game. There's kind of degradation of the capabilities of a lot of players, partly because of competition for talent. Companies like with really vibrant game businesses like that, or others are the best developers accumulating, and big tech companies are hiring the best game developers. It's super talented there. So in some cases, companies aren't competing robustly or getting worse, and making games are less fun. And I think everything else that's happened is kind of a side show to that. There's always political elements, but I think this is the core is the pillars that are fun. And the nature of fun is changing. It turns out that playing a game together with your friends in a socially engaging way with voice chat is way more fun than playing a solitary game for the most part. And there are exceptions to that. But I think we're seeing much more playtime shifting towards games you're playing together with your friends, and not just random internet strangers who happen to play a game who actually know them. And that's certainly been the case with me and most everybody I know who's playing Fortnite games. And it has really significant effect on reshaping the whole game business, because a single player game, you have 20 people with 20 different opinions of what gameplay, each one might buy a different thing. When a multiplayer game, if 20 games out, and each one has their own completely individual preference, each one are independently choosing what gameplay, each one might buy a different game, but they're all realizing they want to play together. And so what players are doing recently is playing the game they like and accept together with their friends, even if it's not the game that every one of them might be preferring to play themselves. Like if you have, and that's certainly the case in different Fortnite groups I play with from time to time. So one player might have been preferring to play COD, one might have been preferring League of Legends, somebody else completely random. It's just fun to play together. We're doing that. And that means that there's really strong metacast law effects in which games which are able to attract a large percentage of your friends are more able to give not only attract but also retain. And so I think Matthew Ball's analysis of this over the years has really documented the trend towards you can call it metaverse, or you can call it large scale multiplayer social gaming. He's really documented this trend, and over the past year or so, it's taken a really, really strong turn towards increasing rate of change. Increasing numbers of players going to Fortnite, where he hit an all-time high of 173 million number of users about a year ago, and another close to peak this time. Roblox is bigger than ever, and this trend is players consolidating into multiplayer games together. And we're seeing another trend related to that, which is awesome single player game that comes out, small multiplayer games. People often will create a vacation, go play that game for a while, and come back. I think Wukong is often an example of that. It's a wonderful game from a brilliant team. In China, they made a game that's no Western players have really seen that type of thing done before. And it was awesome really well, but the players played it for a while and move back on. And that could be lucrative, but a business that's going that kind of games, you have to go into 1 or 2 years and build a business around that, while the other games continue to treat easier. When you have a large number of gamers migrating to a small number of games, the effect of that is increasing revenue for those games, increasing the investment. And there are things that can do with a team of thousands of people building Fortnite internally, and tens of thousands contributing to Fortnite as independent creators. There's things that happen with that level of investment that can't happen with a small game. And so there's some point of increasing money people in for those games. You invest more into games, fun to gain fun, faster rate than other games, and the industry is changing around that. And so I think the lesson for the game industry now is that there are really two big opportunities in pursuing these big games, or games that have the potential to be really big multiplayer experiences, keep players around indefinitely for a very long period of time. And then there are just really good single player and small scale games that people are taking a break from the big games for. And the trend there is going to be towards efficiently developing those games. You can't build one of those games with a $300 million budget, but you can do it with a $40 million budget. You can make a lot of money. So I think that's the main reshaping going on. I think that creates a rather bleak outlook for a lot of category of single player games that have a huge audience reach. And this is one of the restructuring business that technology changes today.
Okay, this could be a good question. Aside from games, what are some of the greatest video games? What video games have been like either impactful to you in your life, or maybe you've seen, created, and you're like, huh, that's a beautiful art piece. Like it could be in a totally different realm. Like obviously for me, I return often to the single player domain of role-playing games. The Elder Scrolls series, Skyrim, that was like a world that they created. The recent game, Baldur's Gate 3, that was really incredible because he's working art and doing a lot of innovative things again in the single player domain. Is there games like that outside the ones you've created?
I'm most impressed with the games that have created what appears to be a living, breathing world. Games that give you the sense that you're just a part of it and there's a lot more happening. There's always more, and it gives you the sense that you can go anywhere and do anything. Even though these games really do have finite limitations in their places you can't go, really creating that sense of wonder is a magical thing. It's one of Breath of the Wild, Skyrim, Red Dead Redemption.
Red Dead is great.
There's an entire competition there. I have a high school classmate that I'm studying rivers and just commenting on like this is one of the very few games that's hydrologically sound. But the way they actually went to the effort of shaping the rivers of erosion dynamics and so on, just attention to detail, and there's something there which it's been funny journeying through I left design a game in 1992. I'm not a game designer. I was very open-minded. The best genre that will ever exist has not been invented, and it's more technological capabilities, and creative people use that, and hopefully empowered by high productivity tools and so on, to see more and more cool things emerge that we never dreamed possible. And the idea of a world simulator is actually really interesting. It's been tried a lot. It's usually extremely slow and expensive to create, but by the time you get better at that will be interesting too.
You said something interesting with the city builders.
Yeah, civilization. Yeah, mind-boggling. They were building a game with that depth that involved so dependent on your actions.
To do that scale of a world where you can step into it. I think Red Dead is a great example. But to do Red Dead Redemption where you can walk around with friends at a large scale. And I guess what you have given so many years was creating the tool that enables the artists to give that attention to that Red Dead does on several of the things. And once you do, there's something magical about that. And once you give your that attention to detail, I don't know what it is, but the love of the artist comes through somehow. You feel the care that they put into it.
That's right, the best games are the whole. Like Call of Duty and League of Legends, it's not only on what you see in the game, but also on how players interact with each other online. That's a really fascinating thing. I wish would be studied more.
I think we talked about this all on several fronts, right? I wish it would be studied more.
Yeah, these old game design decisions that the designers make have a profound impact on players into the game and seeing the game. Fortnite, Battle Royale always had a sense of mystery. Like, you're on this island, but you're not sure exactly what's happening, where you're always out again and why. I'm not a secret holder. I'm not on the design team. I experience Fortnite as a player, but you really do a lot of that, and a good spiritedness as well. Because even when you're limited in Fortnite, there's not like blood spurts and there's not good jokes. You're just teleported out in simulation, and often you end up losing the game in a way that's hilarious enough that you're laughing at it, or you're like respect to that player, he just won because that was clever. And there's a very different dynamic in some games where players tend to be very, very positive towards each other. One of the things I like to do in Fortnite is kind of gauge how the game is going as I play close squad. So in that game, like every other random player play the game together. Sometimes they have voice chat, sometimes they don't. And that internet making regions where I learned a little bit of Battlefield Spanish. So I can teach people how to start out as a extra city. And the positivity of the interactions amongst every kind of person you might ever meet online. Completely on the same scene in the Call of Duty where it's always, everybody's got to be an edgelord.
I love online gaming culture. I have to ask you because it's kind of like one of the legendary games is Grand Theft Auto. Speaking of the worlds that are just like, I mean, that's its whole thing, right? That's that world, the characters, the style, the edginess, all that. But the interesting thing about Grand Theft Auto 6 to me that I want to ask about is they took forever. Is the 6-month thing they mentioned before? You know, there's some games like that just take years to bring to the conclusion. What can you say about that process? That you eventually were able to take on the completion. If you were to look from the outside, why does it take Grand Theft Auto that long, or other companies to take games to the conclusion? And what can you just insight into what that process is like?
Making games is very hard, and especially when you're pushing the boundaries of something. With Grand Theft Auto, it's just the realism and feeling that you're in this huge city, and anything can happen. It's all living and breathing, and you're a part of it. The level with Rockstar is quality that genre is astonishing. And when you're building something at a level of quality or detail you've never been before, you can predict how long it will take. Whatever problems you're solving today, you get to the next iteration of quality on it. You don't know what new problems are more and often. You fix one thing and make it super realistic, and that just highlights the unrealism of other things you need to fix. I think the thing that always comes to mind is that shipping a game is easy if you don't have a high quality standard. You also won't have much success. What we've seen from Rockstar is they take a long time to make amazing games, and it's worth it in the end, right? But that game's bad, right? The game is eventually released, and
do you ever feel like Rockstar is a good example of that? The pressure of delivering quality. Epic has not missed recently that I'm aware of in terms of delivering quality. Do you feel the pressure of that? You're not allowed misses?
It's really good. Everybody's often working very much to the last minute to make something that's it's really hard for these guys to deliver something because you really have to get a lot of stuff up and running before you can judge it. Like it's not until like the next month or so that you really know what you've got and really understand it. And late breaking problems emerge and now it's anything else. It's usually towards the end, and that usually leads to rather and another lesson is that's experience. That means accepting a game that like is a live experience and it's also an experiment, and it's continually being driven. Anytime there's some things that some people don't like, and you learn and you
let me ask you a big philosophical question. So you create these gigantic worlds that bring so much fun to humanity. We also get to learn about humanity. What gives you hope about us humans? About the future of humans, the future of humanity?
I see two contrasting worlds that have been brought about in the digital age. One is the world of social networks, people fighting each other. Massive negativity and politics and hipsterism and creation by engagement, often promoting activity and toxicity. And that's a hard world. I think it's a step backwards in many ways. I think the foundation of the world is actually a little bit shaky because of just the social dynamic that those platforms have brought on. But then I compare that with the good spirit sense of what's happening online when you're connected to real people, like actually playing Fortnite. Fortnite culture, people you've never met before, never talked to, and judging what human connections develop there and whether they're positive. And this would be really, really excellent and endearing. I think the lesson from all that is that humans talking to humans and being together and simulate the real world or the virtual world is a naturally empathetic medium, which naturally leads to bonding. I know conflict sometimes occurs. It's just generally so much more promoting of our social norms and good interactions between people and positivity promoting. Whereas kind of the typing angry message thing at each other as a self-reinforcing negative dynamic, it's negative. And I think you look at social media and you look at gaming that is increasingly social. I can see a bigger divide between any two medium as I see there in terms of the actual social dynamics. One super positive, one super toxic at times.
Yeah, that's actually really text-based media. Now, that could even be around gaming. If you look at Discord, it can be real toxic and toxic. You place humans together in the real world, here in the room. I literally never, very rarely see humans not get along in the physical space. And the degree to which we create a digital space, a metaverse type of space, where it's sufficiently immersive where you feel the other person, the empathy comes out, and the joy that's derived from empathy comes out. And it's just a reminder of humans, like, I don't know, the humans are good, and they want to see the good in others, they want to share the goodness. And then, like, when they get in that group together, there's love there. Now, they might talk shit about some other group, this is the dark side of humans, but together, in terms of the dynamics of that group, it's joyful. So, yeah, that gives me hope as well. The more degree we can create those worlds online and make it super easy for us to connect in that empathic way, the better. And I'm grateful that you are pushing the boundaries of what's possible and creating these worlds. I'm grateful that you're talking to kids, and it's amazing. It's an honor to talk about it. I suppose this conversation with kids support the podcast. Please check out our sponsor in the description. And now, let me leave you some words from Benjamin Franklin. We do not stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. Thank you for listening. That was it.